You're at your old trusty boat. You call mighty sparrow. I'm in the city of Mardi Gras.
Welcome to the Sailing into Oblivion podcast. I'm your host, Jerome Rand, and this is where we sit down with everyday people who do extraordinary things.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the show. Today we have a very, very special guest. If I backtrack a few years, I'm in Maine. This old salty vessel pulls in called Ness, steel-hulled, double-ender, gaff-rigged, absolutely amazing. And off steps this, I guess if you ever have thought about an old sea dog, well, that's who this guy is. His name's Phil, and he's an absolute legend. He's probably sailed across more oceans than I ever will. He's circumnavigated for 10 years. He's really just been there and he's done that. And he has done it with a very similar mindset as I venture out into the sea as well. And this is the kind of conversation I really dream of when I sit down and do this podcast. And he's just a wealth of knowledge and experience. And we get into all sorts of stuff. No notes, no nothing. We just talk and we go from one subject to the next. But he's really, really just the classic sailing guru. I mean, when I think of people like Knox Johnson, Morticia, all that, I would put Phil right up there with him because he's the extent of his travels and his adventures are definitely on par with some of the great sailors of the world. So, man, I'm just so excited. We just finished up, but I'm putting this out. I am going to put it out as one. It's about 2 hours and 15 minutes long. I would put it into two, break it into two, but for some reason the Spotify app is not letting me upload two simultaneously, and I don't want anybody to miss out on it. So whole thing's going out. But before we begin, like I always say, if you want to become part of the family, the Sailing into Oblivion Patreon family, you can follow the link and help keep this show going. The support has led to new equipment for the microphones, new stuff for Sparrow, getting us ready to go back out to sea. And it is with a very humble thanks that all the people that already support the show, you guys really are keeping the adventure alive, and I do appreciate it. We also have the Sailing into Oblivion merch, hoodies, shirts, tank tops, all that sort of stuff. So you can check that out with the other link to Bonfire. And if you want to contact the show, just go to sailingintooblivion.com, hit the podcast button, and contact the show. That goes directly to me. So other than that, without further ado, here's my conversation with Phil.
Yeah,
he is the man.
Well, he was one tough son of a gun, I mean.
Here, pull this up just a little bit. There we go.
Okay.
Cool. Phil, I can't thank you enough for coming and talking with me on this one. But let's not detract from that. I think Bernard Morticia was probably one of my biggest influences as far as opening my eyes to not only sailing the world, but cruising the world on a zero budget. And being able to have these crazy, wonderful experiences intermixed with wrecking boats and just traveling the world.
Yeah, and he was before any of our electronic doodads.
No.
He was pure.
Very.
Celestial and all the rest that goes along with that. And he was... I don't know if he died before or after the electronic revolution, so I don't even know.
Oh, after. He died in 94.
All right, so he knew that GPS was on the scene. I don't know if he ever used it or not.
Yeah, that's a good question. I wonder if he actually did or not. I'm sure he probably toyed with it because, people must have been throwing him every new gadget in the world because he was so well known.
Well, he had two boats. Joshua and his second boat were essentially given to him by people that had the resources because
that's
they felt sorry for him.
When you write a really good book, all of a sudden, bang.
Well, it was The Long Way.
The Long Way was his big one, yeah. Although I'll tell you, the logical route where he and his wife do their honeymoon throughout the Tuamotus and then take the Southern Ocean back. That book was unreal when it gets to the point where they go through that like 5-day gale, and he talks about the first 24 hours, and it ended up being, I believe, like a double low. So it was really intense, and then things started to ease up, but then it cranked back up. And he talks about the first 24 hours, but he says that he could never do the rest of that storm justice in a book, and it was best saved for good company around a fire.
Right. Well, okay, so in that book that I showed you the other day, which is his autobiography, he criticizes himself badly about the writing of that book towards the end, because he felt like he didn't give it the justice that it needed, and he skipped over too much.
Well, and I think that's something that comes along with artists and writers, no matter what. You know, you're always going to look at your own work and be like, oh, that could have been better. But,
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
think about it now. How many sailors read his books as absolute, like, Bibles almost of the ocean?
Well, because he's so inspirational, because he was like a basic guy. Like, for me, I've never had a whole bunch of heroes, but he was like one of them, just because of like in The Long Way, he was just communing with the ocean, becoming one with the ocean.
Oh, yeah.
And one with the whole spinning planet in the universe. And here you are on this little green marble in some little pissant boat out in the middle of nowhere.
On the biggest expanse. I mean, you know, they call it planet Earth, but they should call it planet Ocean, because 70% of it is water.
Right.
And we're the type of people that go out and spend a lot of time out there in that arena. How many, not that I like to like throw numbers out, and I don't know. If somebody asked me how many miles I've sailed, I could say maybe between 100 and 200,000. You got any ballpark figure?
Well, okay, so I know logbook-wise, I have 47,000 miles on Ness.
Okay.
So that's what I have in my logbook. That's legit sailing on Ness, which is now 8 years.
Okay.
So that's 47,000 miles in 8 years. And then there was 30 years of sailing before that. I did a circumnavigation in from 1978 to 1988, 10 years circumnav.
Oh,
And so like there were some miles on that one. So and
a couple of miles, just
yeah,
a few.
and I did, and I did other trips too, like across the Pacific a couple of times independently, and across the Atlantic a couple of times independently outside of both of those, the circumnav and Ness. So overall, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it's not. I think it's one of those things. You get to a certain point. When I was doing like yacht deliveries, I think I got to about 50,000 miles, and I stopped counting because it just didn't seem to really matter.
It doesn't after a while.
Yeah.
It seems to matter.
In the
seems
beginning.
to matter to me. Yeah, oh yeah, man, 25,000 miles. That's as long as going around the world. Or, yeah, I've sailed this boat, this, that, and the other thing. But then after a while, it's like, so what?
It's not about it. Yeah,
That's
no,
not what
definitely
it's
isn't.
about, and or the time spent. Like you have definitely spent more consecutive time. What was your circumnav?
I was out 271 days.
All right. Well, yeah. So at once, my longest, all at one crack was 101.
101 though. Hey.
And that was with this boat. That was Cape Town to Grenada.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. Oh
It
jeez.
doesn't count though.
Cape Town, Grenada is about what 6,000 miles or something.
Yeah.
But that's in some of the best trade winds in the world.
Well, it was really good sailing, and I really enjoyed it because like there wasn't any real weather to speak of.
Yeah.
There was like, I don't know, light gale, like 30 knots or something for a day or two or something like that.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, like, there wasn't anything really ferocious or horrendous. And I didn't see any ships at all.
Yeah, there's not much. The South Atlantic, I've always said that if the apocalypse happens, South Atlantic high, that's where I'm going.
Yeah.
Nobody's
I mean, like,
down
you
there.
live your life out there, and the fishing was really good. The fishing was really great, all the way from Cape Town all the way to Grenada. The only thing after Brazil, going across the equator, going towards Grenada, there was a awful lot of sargasso grass.
Yeah.
And so it was impossible to fish.
Well, and then does it get caught up on your wind vane, the water, the hydro
Oh yeah,
blade?
I had it all over in my bobstay.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
like if the boat plunged, I have it all over the place, and it dried fast and it stunk and it created bugs. Flies.
Yeah. Well, and the sound when you go through a big patch, you're down below,
No.
and all of a sudden you hear.
Yeah.
It was sort of
And
like,
go,
holy cow, what is that?
Yeah, and after you realize what it is, I would be saying to myself, "Well, there goes a knot."
Yeah, well, because it's all hanging off.
Yeah, you're
everything.
dragging like 10 tons. Like I woke up one morning, I think the first morning I was around it, and I left the lure in the water overnight, and came up in the morning. The whole damn thing is like it's got like 2 tons of sargasso
right.
weed
I'm
on it.
surprised it didn't break it.
Well, it did break at some point. I lost it. That's when I quit fishing.
Right. Yeah. There was so when I crossed the equator going north and got just to the point where the seaweed was pretty bad. There's tons of Dorado under there.
Tons of them.
of
Oh
them.
yeah, they're everywhere, man.
they're hard
prolific
to-
fish.
Yeah, and so I adopted this sort of technique where I would wait until I could see them because they'd be hunting the flying fish. As soon as I saw them, then I would pull out my lure and I would just throw it out. It was just a hand line.
Yeah.
And there were two times where that lure hit the water and it barely was able to drag for 15 seconds before that fish got it, and I yanked it right in.
Yeah, that's good.
But you can't just troll them because, they just
No, you
fill
can't just
right
throw
up.
them. I was trying the same thing, like looking for the holes
Yeah,
in the
right.
sargasso
Oh,
weed
get
and
it.
throw that baby out there, man. And actually, those fish, after the equator, were really the best Dorado I was getting because they were small.
Yeah.
They weren't that big,
Like
They
this.
were big enough to get, a couple good fillets out of them where you could have good meal now and good enough in the morning.
Well, and I typically use the lures that I'm using might be 3 inches, maybe 4 inches long. And a lot of them I was making out of old beer cans. You just cut it into the shape of a squid,
Yeah.
puts that right over the top of a hook, and they loved it because it glinted in the sun. And all
Yeah.
that.
Oh, that's what they like is the sparkly stuff.
Exactly, and they just go right after it. But I don't know. Outside of them, I didn't really catch many other types of fish besides the flying fish that ended up on deck.
Yeah, a lot of tuna.
I never got a lot of tuna. One south of New Zealand.
The thing with the tuna is they usually wound up being too big. And so I
is a
started
lot, yeah.
filing off all my barbs so I could get rid of them easier.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now, is that because you not have refrigeration on the boat?
No, I don't have refrigeration. So,
Well, how come you don't salt the meat or something?
well, I have canned. I'm a canner.
Oh,
So I
really?
do can. I have tons of canned meat of all
Yeah, yeah.
kinds. So one time I did catch a tuna. It was about 50 pounds. And he took the hook, man. He went for it. It was like in his gut, and I couldn't get it out without killing him.
Right.
I didn't want to cut it because it would still be in his gut and he would die sooner or later.
Yeah.
So anyway, I had this fish and it was big. It was like this huge fish and a big
like
fat
5
thing.
feet. Yeah, probably
Yeah,
weighed
well, not quite, but
80 pounds or something.
yeah, somewhere in there.
That's a lot of meat.
So I said, well, okay. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to try canning it because I've never done that at sea before,
Yeah.
and see what happens, and had a good couple of days off of it fresh and then canned the rest, and it canned really well. It was like 100 times better than store-bought canned.
Oh, I'm sure.
100
kidding me?
times.
So do you have to cook it and then can it?
It depends. With fish, no. With fish, you just put it in a jar raw
Mm-hmm.
and some liquid, and then you can it because the canning is cooking it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's in boiling water for like 20 minutes. The jars are.
The jars are. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it cooks. So like when I learned the canning thing in Alaska when I was living there doing salmon, and I was doing it all wrong because I was cooking it. And then a friend of mine, saw me doing what I was doing and said, hey, you don't have to cook it because you're cooking it twice. It would be a lot better just putting it in a jar raw. So
So it's in like a mason jar,
It's a mason jar.
and it's not submerged. Does it have the cap on?
It has a cap on. It has a seal lid, and then the screw down thing, and you bring the water to just below the top of the jar, and you got 4 jars in there at the same time in the pressure cooker. You got to use 4 jars whether you're canning something or not. If you're not filling up 4 jars, then you got to put water in the other ones because that will keep the jar from falling over.
Oh, okay.
And with raw meat, the general rule of thumb is 20 minutes after it starts whistling.
Oh, okay. And then you screw the cap on, or the cap's already
No, the
on?
cap's already on, and then it seals. You just put the cap down lightly to keep it in place, and when it seals, there's like this little bubble on top of the seal.
Yeah,
that's
it makes
up.
noise.
Yeah,
Right.
and pop when it goes down. So you just wait for it to go down.
And that's
wait
when
for
it
to pop.
cools, right?
Yeah, and you just. I have like, I've got like I started out with this trip. I got like 95 jars.
Really?
Mostly all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Chicken soup is a big thing for me because I like chicken soup, so you can make really good chicken soup.
Yeah.
And you just unscrew the lid, pop the lid off, and you got like a meal that is 1,000 times, without exaggerating, 1,000 times better than Campbell's or anything else.
Or, I'm assuming a lot better than Mountain House.
I don't do that stuff, man. I don't have a single freeze-dried nothing on my boat. Nothing. I did it one time with somebody else on somebody else's boat. I was on this trip with them, and they had all this Mountain House stuff. And I'm going, it's like, no way.
It doesn't taste great until you're really hungry.
Until you're really hungry, yeah. Okay, so on the trip from New Zealand to Chile, a friend of mine gave me an emergency ration pack.
Okay, yeah.
And I just put that stuff away, and I figured, man, I'm never going to use this shit, And then one afternoon, I was just really hungry, and I didn't feel like dicking around with all the stuff that I use mostly is beans, rice, pasta, flour, bake a lot of bread.
Yeah.
Everything's like beans, rice, pasta.
Like full-on traditional sailor.
Yeah, and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so I dipped into the emergency ration. It was like chicken cacciatore or something.
Yeah.
And, broke open the bag in hot water for a second and scarfed that down and go, damn, man, this is okay. It's like not the greatest, but like it's better than popcorn. And, which I do too.
Popcorn's fun. I definitely have a lot of popcorn when I'm out at sea.
Yeah,
it's
popcorn.
fun to make,
It is fun. And
as long as you don't burn it and then the cabin smells terrible.
well, how do you do it? Do you have an air popper, or do you have it in
I
a
just
frying
do it
pan
right on the
in
stove,
the pot?
a little bit of olive oil and some
Yeah.
butter and a little seasoning, and just let her go.
Yeah, well, I do it in my pressure cooker, and it comes out perfect almost every time.
Oh, nice. Now, is a pressure cooker, that's using electricity, right?
No.
It's not.
No, it's stovetop.
Oh, it's stovetop. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So it has a lid that fits with a seal,
Yeah,
and
as it heats up.
and it heats up. Then you have this gizmo on top. There's different kinds that jiggle. And that's allowing the excess pressure off.
Right, so it doesn't explode.
Right.
Well, I think Mortizier, he talks about when they were in Cape Town, way back in his first voyage, the only way a cormorant was edible was to actually put it in a pressure cooker. Because, again, they didn't have any money, and they were down there shooting them with slingshots.
Yeah, he was a slingshot guy. He was a big slingshot guy. He learned the slingshot thing when he was a kid.
Look at that can. That's my emergency ration right there. Yoder's bacon.
Okay, so I can bacon.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's canned bacon. That's real
You know
bacon.
what? I do remember you telling me about this when we were in Maine about canned bacon.
Yeah. My brother Sven. He gave it
And I
to me.
remember seeing canned bacon from New Zealand years and years ago. So I got on this kick about canning my own stuff. So I can bacon and canned sausage. I can chicken. I can. When I'm in the canning mode, I'll buy a whole roast beef.
Oh, really?
And do it in the oven and cook it.
And
And then can it.
how long of a life does that?
Indefinitely.
No way.
Indefinitely.
What's the oldest can you ever ate then?
Of my own? Of
Yeah.
home? Okay, well,
Challenge.
probably a couple years.
Couple years.
Yeah, because I put stuff in the bin, and it was like way in the back, and then I just kept putting more stuff in over the top
I've
of
done
it.
that.
And then I was in Oriental at my base, and I figured, this is a good time to get this stuff out of here and clean it out and see what's up. And so I came across a can of hamburger meat. I was like 2 years old. It was 2 years old.
I
I
love it.
popped the lid off of that thing and tasted it. It tasted just fine. Made spaghetti sauce out of it. It was like one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
Hey,
right. Hey,
That's one of my favorite things to can, actually.
Is hamburger meat?
Is hamburger meat, because you can do so much with it.
Oh,
You can
totally.
do like spaghetti sauce. You can do tacos. You can do like sloppy joes. You can like make eggs and meat. Anything.
Well, and that's a huge important thing, especially when you're going to be out for a long time. Having the ability to make like a variety of different foods. I mean,
variety.
lest we forget the wise words of Knox Johnson when they asked him if he would do anything different.
Corned beef.
He's like, I wouldn't bring just corned
Yeah,
beef.
he had like 500 cans of corned beef or something.
Oh my god!
Right.
I couldn't imagine. I mean,
Yeah.
I eat a lot of rice. I have probably 50 or 60 pounds of rice sitting in that cupboard right there, and a bunch of oatmeal. Those are like the staple things that I like to keep on board.
Yeah.
As like, if I run out of everything else or something else gets ruined or whatever, I know I can last for quite a long time now. Because that first trip I ran out.
So what kind of rice do you use?
There's a mix between brown rice and then white rice. Pretty basic.
Yeah.
know. And it was just one of those things where it's inexpensive enough where I was just like, well, let me just buy a
Yeah,
bunch
you
of
can
it.
get it.
As long
yeah.
as it stays dry, it's pretty much good.
So do you have you had any weevil issues?
I've only had weevils come out through some like pancake mix stuff that I had.
What about oatmeal?
I've had mold get into the oatmeal where like the cardboard underneath gets wet and then you open it up and the oatmeal.
Yeah, I don't know if it's because I have stuff that I have on the boat longer than it should be there. But like I've lost oatmeal and rice to weevils. However, Bernard came up, and I read this a few years ago. He came up with the trick that actually works. It's like it kind of leaves a taste a little bit. After you get used to it, it's no big deal. Okay, so what he does is take a cotton swab and puts alcohol on it and puts that in the container of the rice or oatmeal.
Yeah.
And it kills them.
So if you've already got weevils.
Yeah, well,
Because
I have always, you can eat them,
a little extra protein.
All right, and the other thing about weevils is like with oatmeal, if I have weevils in the oatmeal, I put the oatmeal in the pot, put water in the pot, heat it up so it doesn't boil yet.
Mm-hmm.
The weevils will die and come to the top,
and
you
scrape
just
'em off.
skip them off, and
Right,
that's that.
right.
So I don't really worry about too much, except it can get to the point where they contaminate everything because they're excreting, and there's more weevils than there is oatmeal, and all of a sudden, like, you just have like this green, horrible, ugly mess that you're not gonna eat.
Yeah. Well, and then you're in line for an infestation. Have you ever dealt with? Well, I'm sure you must have, but cockroaches on the boat.
Oh yeah, it's here.
Oh, here.
Well, in the Carolinas.
Yeah.
So I just buy these things, these traps.
Mm-hmm.
They work.
They do.
They work. You gotta change them every couple of weeks, and they're not real expensive. I don't worry about it, but like they work. Yeah, I've had cockroaches, and
Get them out at sea. I've had them out at sea once, but I swear, and I don't know how this is even possible, but I saw one cockroach 3 weeks into a trip, and then got it, grabbed it, threw it overboard. I never saw another one after.
yeah,
That's pretty rare, though. Usually, if you see one, you've got a ton.
yeah. I don't know how they propagate. if it's an egg sperm thing or if it's a physical contact thing.
I had always heard that if you like smash it, step on it, it's like sprays the eggs all over the place. But that's
they're the
probably
most
just
disgusting thing in the world, man. I like just get rid of them. I can't stand it.
No, they're gross. I mean, I would rather have cockroaches than mice because I know mice can do damage. Like
Mice can do
eating the wires.
damage. I had one mouse. It came on board in a boatyard in North Carolina, dropped out of a tree.
Yeah.
And I started hearing all this stuff going on. I knew it was on the boat.
Yeah.
And I tried to, and then I was getting holes in all my plastic bags.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you
and,
got a
and,
mouse.
and boxes,
Mm-hmm.
plastic
but it's
bags.
the wiring they go for, too.
They go for everything. And so after a while, I said, okay, I've played this game enough with this mouse. It's like broken. I mean, I pick up a bag of oatmeal and the whole thing pours on the floor because there's a hole in it this big. I said, okay, I've had enough. So I got some traps, and one night I was in bed, I heard the trap, bang, so I get up, and that mouse was the healthiest looking mouse I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
I felt bad about killing him. Because he was a nice mouse, he was big and his coat was shiny and everything.
He's eating good foods.
Yeah,
off of
he
your
was
boat.
like,
Yeah,
he was styling. He had it made. He had this whole well-provisioned boat to like gnaw.
no junk food or anything.
No junk food, nothing, man. Nobody hassling him. It was like, we see you later, Buster.
How much do you attribute? Because you're of the lovely age of 75, correct?
Right.
And you are still solo sailing, moving and shaking. How much of that do you attribute to what you eat?
All of it.
All of it? And you've been on this sort of pretty healthy, non-junk food, non-processed food diet?
Yeah, my only problem has been sugar.
Ah, sweet tooth.
Sweet tooth up to yin yang. I used to like provision with 20 bags of cookies.
Yeah. Hey, you need that for morale.
For
That's what I
morale.
always
Okay,
felt
so
like.
my best cookie story is when I sailed from Montenegro, Mexico to the Marquesas. I had picked up a stranded hitchhiker, a young woman. She was 21 years old. The boat that she was on, they decided at the last minute that they weren't making the Marquesas crossing, and she was like begging everybody to go. And I figured, I liked her. She was a nice young girl, and I figured, okay, I've never had anybody on the boat, but I'll try this. So
Yeah, it's just a quick little sail.
yeah, well, it was a month and a half.
Yeah,
it was
right.
a month and a half. But she was okay, so I'll say that she never angst me. She really learned how to get along on the boat and everything, and she was good. We never had any problem or anything. The point is like every day at sunset, we'd have our cookie frenzy.
Yeah.
A bag of Mexican cookies. They bought cases of for like 50 cents a bag of these horrendous cookies of various kinds.
Yeah.
Bring a bag out and have our cookie frenzy every night at sunset. So like that's the kind of junkie I am. And I used to have lots and lots of cookies on board, and I'm a baker as well. So I'll bake chocolate chips and I'll bake anything, and I can bake. So I did notice that like my metabolism and everything was changing, and I was figuring that I might be coming close to having diabetes. So
Oh, really?
I just said, okay, I read a lot of stuff, and I figured the best thing that I can do is just cut the sugar down to hardly nothing
Yeah.
and be sensible about it. It's like instead of eating a bag of cookies, like you eat 4 cookies, okay?
Yeah.
Because I eat the whole bag, man. If I'm like in the U.S., I'd do the worst shit in the world. Go buy a bag of Oreos and a quart of milk and suck down the whole goddamn thing at one time. So I just quit doing that.
Good man. Well, sugar's it hasn't been until the last 100 years that sugar's become completely readily available and ingested in every food
it
source.
wasn't available almost to the entire world
Yeah.
until the mid 1700s and stuff until the plantations in the Caribbean and all that.
Right, sugar cane and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I definitely agree with you on that one. I try not to eat any sugar at all if I can, but every once in a while I have to have one of those.
I have
Twisted Teas.
sugar on the boat, and I'll have a cup of coffee in the morning. It's got sugar in it, but it's like a teaspoon of sugar, and that's it. And I will still make sweet stuff. I'll make some cookies, or I like banana bread. But instead of like scoffing it all, I'll just make enough where I can keep it for a week.
A little bit of moderation,
Yeah,
a little
a little
self-control.
moderation, a little self-control, a little discipline, And then I've learned other things to keep healthy about using readily store-bought available herbs like cayenne, ginger, turmeric, garlic, rosemary.
Yep.
Those things there, they'll keep you healthy.
A little apple
cider vinegar,
Yeah,
yes.
That's a good one.
That's one of those things, yes. Apple cider vinegar. Turmeric, I have turmeric in both. I just bought a whole bunch of fresh just today and yesterday at the Publix fresh turmeric. And ginger, I use a lot of ginger because ginger I know is good.
Ginger's really good.
And the cayenne. This afternoon, like I boiled, for tea, make a slice up some ginger, slice up some turmeric, a little cayenne, and down that, and it keeps everything kind of moving.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I mean, you're. When I grow up, I want to be just like you. I'll be lucky if I am.
Well, my only advice is like find a way to exercise. I don't know how you approach that. I used to exercise a lot. I used to walk a lot. I used to ride a bike a lot. I used to swim. Now, because I'm traveling on the boat, I don't get all that exercise. So, like, when I come ashore, like I rode the bike today a few miles, I try to get as much exercise as I can. And I don't have an outboard, so I row whenever I can.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
But at sea, I've tried doing like the calisthenics that I learned when I was in the military.
It's tough.
It's really hard. Well, it's hard to do.
The boat's moving.
Yeah, it's hard to do a sit-up when you're being flipped over,
Yeah.
And or you're doing it in a bunk or whatever, I try to do like stretches and stuff like that.
I think that's one of the big ones. Yeah, is trying to do almost some sort of like yoga, almost routines.
Yoga's hard on the boat too if the boat's moving.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. They all are. I mean, I it's hard to even like do push-ups out in that cockpit.
But here's the good news is, for me, with my boat being what it is, a catch and gaff rig, and no, I don't have a single winch on the boat.
Oh, so you have to do that all.
So
by
everything,
sweating
like
it.
when I'm sailing, I am fairly physical.
Yeah.
And how many countless times a day am I up and down that ladder?
Yeah, right. That's
I
true.
mean, that's got to be, that counts.
Oh, absolutely.
That counts for exercise.
It may only be 4 stairs,
But
if you're
100
doing it
times,
Yeah.
and, you're holding on, you're getting thrown around, all the rest. And just the inherent movement of the boat itself. And, you're flexing and you're relaxing and you're flexing. And, you're like always moving.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Always. Except for like when you're in deep sleep, that's about the only time that you're not.
like wedged into the bunk somewhere.
Yeah, and you wedge yourself in there.
Well, other than that, yeah, I mean, I know I'm getting a ton of exercise when I'm running dead downwind and the boat's rolling 20 degrees either side because you are holding on and you're flexing that way. Then you're
Will you do that?
Oh,
will
heck
you
yeah.
run dead downwind?
Absolutely. If
All
that's the way I want to go. I mean, obviously it's a lot more comfortable if I sail on broad reach and I have a jib up and all that sort of stuff. But sometimes I need to be going that way and I want to go that way. And so I've gotten so used to it because, down in the Southern Ocean, I mean, you're in those westerlies and I want to go due east and I want to get out of there as fast as possible. So I sort of, in the beginning I was like, holy cow, this is awful. It's just rolling. But then you get used to it, and then you sort of build your life around it. Now I can do it all day long.
All right, well, good for you because I don't.
Yeah, right.
I'll do a broad reach. What I'll do is like on the chart is draw a straight line, like from New Zealand to Chile,
Yeah.
and then at noon every day just tack across it.
Right. Gotcha.
And yeah, because like after a while the rolling, I just go like, you know what, Philip, you don't really need to be doing this. It's going
Yeah.
to slow you down some, but it's never really slowed me down all that much. You know, it
Well, 'cause
does. It can.
You're
but
going faster, typically.
and it's way more comfortable.
Way more comfortable.
Way more comfortable. I mean, I don't know how your boat is compared to mine, in
I
terms
think-
of rolling.
I
but
think
like,
ours are almost identical.
well, we're. What's your beam?
I think Sparrow's about 10 or 11 feet wide.
Okay, so Ness is 10.6, and the official measurement is 31.5 feet on deck. That's in between the perpendiculars.
Yeah.
But if you go outside the perpendiculars, it's just a tad over 32.
Okay.
So they're comparable, and they're the same
You've got
basic
bowsprit.
hull. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're the same basic hull shape. The only thing that's really different is the rig.
The rig and the fact yours is made out of steel. And mine's made
Yeah,
out
and
of
how much do you weigh?
fiberglass. Between around 13 tons.
Okay, so I just weighed in on travel lift scale a few weeks ago, and I was 12.
Oh, lightweight.
Yeah, and I
I'm
was
just
like,
kidding.
I was 10,000 in Tahiti.
Oh, you were saying
a few years ago,
You're
and I gained
gaining weight.
2,000 pounds. Man, I gained a ton in a couple of years. And it's not
It
from being
happens.
waterlogged.
Yeah, right. It's definitely not from being waterlogged. And what type of boat is she? What type of design?
Originally, it was a Tahiti Ketch designed by John Hanna back in the 30s. And it was a published design in the Mechanics Illustrated
Really?
for dreamers that he wasn't selling the design when he first built it,
Yeah.
first designed it, he wasn't selling it. And then he had this inspiration to call it a Tahiti Ketch instead
good
of like
name.
some other
great name.
Yeah, Tahiti Ketch. And then when it came out in Mechanics Illustrated, all these backyard guys who had the dream started building them. There were thousands of them.
Yeah.
Some of them sailed, some of them didn't. Most of them didn't because they were backyard guys.
Right.
But there were plenty of them around. And then when he died, John Hanna, when he died, years and years later, his wife was financially scraping. She sold the design
Oh, okay.
to this guy, Weston Farmer, and he redesigned it and now calls it Tahiti Ana. And the Tahiti Ana was redesigned to be built in steel.
And that's the one that
That's
you
what
have.
I have. And so they added a foot to the length and took a foot out of the beam. Where Tahitis were pushing it on the beam to length ratio.
That's like almost more than 1/3, right?
Yeah, it was like a freaking bathtub.
That's a bit ridiculous, yeah.
But
And
and they did plenty of oceans. They did, there were Tahitis that went around the world. They were always the slowest. Well, Ness is still the slowest anyway. But so that's what I wound up with, which is modified Tahiti.
well, she's a beautiful boat. I mean, it's so funny that, the first time we met was 2021 up in Maine. You hauled out up at Night Marine. And that's where we met. And then you went off, and I figured, shoot, I don't know if I'll ever bump into him again. And then, lo and behold, 3 days ago, you pull into the marina here down in South Carolina. And, it was so funny because Brian came over. He's like, man, you got to meet this guy. And I can remember being up in Maine and Dave coming up to me and saying, man, you've got to meet this guy. And just because everybody thinks I'm an old sea dog. And like I said, I hope I'm like you when I grow up. But in any event, It's just so crazy that the world has brought us right. I mean, literally, you're on the same dock as I am. So
yeah,
crazy.
and it's not really all that unusual in our lifestyle. Like, how many dozens
True,
of times
true.
have you run into people that you've met elsewhere?
Yeah, well, like-minded people, you are going to end up in the same circles, the same
Yeah,
places. But you've sailed since 2021, that summer. I've done 2 laps of the Atlantic, or 1 lap of the Atlantic down to the equator and back, and then 1 around essentially Bermuda on this last one with the knockdown.
I went to Europe.
You went to Europe, but you got knocked down on that trip, right?
No, that was like the next year.
That was the next year. Okay.
Yeah.
So 2001, you went over to Europe from Maine?
Well, no, I went when I left you in Maine. Last time I saw you in Maine, that was like the trip that I left in November.
Mm-hmm.
That was going to the Caribbean.
Oh, okay.
So I went to the Caribbean. No, it wasn't. I think it was earlier than 21. I think it was 20. It was the year of that COVID.
Oh, was I headed to the Northwest Passage that year then?
When you and I separated, I think that's what you were doing was the figure 8.
Yeah, okay.
The figure 8 thing. Okay, so I went to the Caribbean, and I was in the American Virgin Islands, and I got wind that, no pun, that there was the classic race was going to happen in Antigua.
Okay,
The big classic race. And so I got a brochure from that and saw all these boats were going to be there and everything. And one of the events, it just, I don't know why it caught my fancy. It just like sounded so cool. It was a single-handed gaff rig race.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Right up your alley.
Anybody with a gaff race. Well, I'm not a racer.
No,
I'm like the turtle.
Yeah,
I'm like the last one in everywhere, always. My boat's the slowest boat on the world cruising fleet. Love to say that is the truth. And I'm not a racer. I am not a racer. But I figured, okay, man, that would be so much fun racing Ness against other single-handers with gaff rig boats. And all I want, the only thing I'm looking at is to finish.
Yeah.
And to be allowed to come to the bar with everybody else, have some dignity about it. Be the last one in, but yeah, man, we finished.
They always cheer for the last one in.
Okay, so I was heading to Antigua when the whole COVID thing happened.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
It was right then.
And did they shut their borders?
They shut the whole thing down. They canceled the classic week, and they canceled the race week, which is immediately after that, which is just racing of all different classes and stuff.
Yeah.
So they canceled that, and then my agenda was I was going to do the Antigua single-handed thing, the classic, party hardy for a week or so with all these boats from all over the place, and then cross the Atlantic to Brest, France, for the once every 4-year Festival of the Sea, which is a gathering of tall ships and all the other classic boats that exist on the planet. They were saying like they're expecting in Brest, in this bay, like 30,000 boats.
Oh, really?
From all over the world.
It sounds like a madhouse.
It's a madhouse, total madhouse. Nautical madhouse. And it's like a party for 2 weeks.
You'd fit right in.
I wanted to, man. And at that point, I was like 72 or 73 or something. I figured, okay, man, this is the chance to go and do sea chanties, and hang out with all these sailors from all over the world. And I would fit because my boat isn't the greatest, but it is cool enough to like hang with
character.
Hang enough,
Got
cool
great
enough.
Character.
Got enough character to hang, I'd be accepted. It might be funky, but okay. We can deal with that because who am I? I'm Funky Phil. All right. And then they canceled it.
Right. Yeah.
They canceled it, and because there are so many of the world's big sailing ships involved, all the big, like the Eagle and Esmeralda and ships from all over the planet, they all have their programs and agendas, so they just can't say, well, okay, we're not doing it this year, we'll do it next year, because they have plans.
Right.
So the organizers in France they've put it pretty much on the back burner right
Oh, it
now.
still
So it's
hasn't
not
happened.
no. And so I was on their mailing list on the email, and I emailed them because I wanted to make a plan. And I said, well, so okay, so like, when's the next time that you're planning on doing this? And they said, we're indefinitely off the chart for right now.
Mm.
And it would have to be at least 4 years to catch up with the loop
Yeah.
if the other vessels involved are interested, you know.
Yeah, because
in doing
they're
it.
on like a world tour, the tall
They're
ships,
all
right?
on tours, and they're all doing the bigger ships like the Eagle and Esmeralda from Chile, and all the other big school training ships. They have programs,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like a schedule for they're taking recruits and cadets out for a year or something,
Yeah.
and
yeah.
then they have some lay time, and then they do it again. So
And they do like events in ports, and then they do the ocean crossing where
Yeah.
they have
Well, they
customers.
do like, okay, so the thing in France, most of them, what they do is like they're coming from all over the world. The ones that are cadet ships, they have the cadets that are doing, an ocean leg, or if they're charter, they're booked.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
A lot of
yeah.
them are booked, big
Years in
charter,
advance.
years, and like, guys, people are spending fantastic amounts of money to be on some tall ship that's sailing across the ocean and winding up in the biggest party in the world, you know?
I've got a buddy of mine, the guy, his name is Phil as well. He gifted me this beautiful old sextant that I use, pretty much every time I go out. But he does that. He hops on those boats and goes across the Atlantic. I think he's done it a couple of times. He says he absolutely loves it because, one of the crazy things, I think the last one he was on, it was slow going from the Azores to the Mediterranean. And so they had them working pretty much, throwing more and more sail up because they had to sort of keep on schedule.
Right.
And so he always says, like, it feels like you're
Like the real
one of
deal, a
indentured
sailor,
crew
man.
on this
Yeah.
boat. And
Yeah.
they keep waking me up to go put more sail up.
Yeah, the experience of doing that, of being on an authentic sailing vessel, and being a part of it and everything. Yeah.
I remember walking around on the Constitution when I was a little kid. My dad's side of the family are all from Boston, and so I definitely remember that. But I've never been under sail on any sort of big, tall ship or anything like that.
Yeah, me neither. Except like the biggest that I worked on a 106-foot schooner in Singapore. That was like the biggest.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Doing
a cow schooner.
moving cows?
No, cows. It's the design is from Cows, England.
Right,
It was fancy schmancy. It was a Lipton tea yacht type.
Oh, wow. Doing
with
like
a-
day sails
with-
and stuff?
No, charter.
Charter? Oh, very
Yeah,
cool.
I was like I was before the mast.
Yeah, I'll bet you
Yeah, and I did it for 6 months because I really learned a lot.
were. Yeah.
But being an American, it was like I'm not subservient to anybody. I am not a second-class citizen, and screw you. And it was like, yeah. But the captain was really cool. I mean, as far as teaching, and I wanted to learn. So like, we got a rapport. He was a ex-British Navy commander, and he acted like one. He was like kind of stuffy.
Yeah.
But and his ship was like the real deal. It like kept it like perfect, and there was like flag etiquette and all this stuff.
A place
And-
for everything and everything in its place.
Yeah, and you stay forward of the mast until you are called to come to the after deck, and then you do your duty, and then you disappear to the foremast. It was like a
Right.
lot of that, and we were eating different food. From what
was
the
that?
charter
Wow.
was. The charter.
Oh, well, yeah. I'll
The
bet.
captain's wife was this French beauty, and she was like, totally gifted in the galley. And so, like, we'd see the food that she was giving the guests,
Yeah.
and we'd know what we were getting. And then after a while, after 6 months, I just said, I am really done being the boy.
Yeah, right. How
But-
old were you when you were doing that?
Oh, man. 35.
35. Oh, okay. Yeah. It's a good time to be doing that stuff.
Yeah, and I mean the fun part was I really learned how to sail a schooner, and we had an incident. I don't remember how that got started, but we were in an island off of the coast of Malaysia, and John, the captain, John Guthrie, he went ashore with the paperwork, and we were in this open anchorage, and he said that this is really, really iffy, this anchorage, and if the wind comes up, you got to get out of here. And he says, I am trusting you with this boat and the whole show. If you got to go, I want you to go. If it starts blowing, get that anchor up and get the hell out of here. And send me a message and we'll talk, and you come back as soon as you can, or I'll meet you somewhere, but like get the boat out of here.
Yeah.
So it happened.
Oh, really?
So it blew, and I was like, holy fuck, man, we got to really go. And there was crew, and I said, well, John said, I'm the captain and we're going. And so like we just took off, and it was like 4 days, and we wound up coming back to the same place, Terengganu. So he trusted me with his 106-foot, 200-year-old.
That's a lot of trust.
Yeah, a lot of trust.
A lot of trust.
So like that was like a real experience for me. And the other thing, and this is all I'll say about that, is his wife, Nanu, she was French. She was a really beautiful woman. She was pregnant. And we were crossing the Indian Ocean, and one night, it was just a beautiful night. It was like 15 knots or so on the beam. The boat was just like schooning.
Yeah, yeah.
It was just like whoosh, up over the swell, really long swell, just beautiful swell. And I was in the rigging on the cross trees, those full moons, just sitting up there checking it out.
Yeah.
And Nanu she was pregnant. She was on the piano. There was a built-in piano.
Oh, wow.
She was playing. She was just feeling the ocean and the vibe and her baby and the whole thing.
Yeah.
And she was playing, and I was up in the cross trees, and it was like the most magical couple of minutes of my entire life. It was like, whoa, man. Like, this is like, if I died right now, this is complete. You know?
Yeah. That's something that I've run across plenty of times out at sea, is that feeling, whether it's, just some crazy sunset or just the whole mood of the sea and the sails and the boats moving, and you just get into this overwhelming feeling of like, this is the perfect place, and it's all yours. And there's no interruption. There's no wall in between.
No, I have felt that a bunch of times on crossings. The boat's moving. It doesn't matter if it's night or day. The boat's moving really well, and like that, like, hey man, like for real, me, Philip, out here, thousands of miles from nowhere with this boat, doing what you're supposed to do, and it's all good and it's all really beautiful, and like this is what you really came for. There was a lot of moments like that.
Yeah.
And then there were special moments like, when there was like 1,000 dolphins around you.
Right.
Literally, you've seen it right from horizon to horizon, nothing but dolphins. They're jumping all over the place. Like,
I had I think it was on this last trip. No, not the last trip. Maybe it was the year before. A super pod, which is like, I don't know the technical definition, but hundreds and hundreds of dolphins came up, and they're just mulling around and da-da-da. And I started taking a little film or whatever, but all of a sudden, one of them must have heard some bait ball off in the distance, and in unison, they all took off.
Yeah.
And it sounded like a racetrack or something. It was like, whoo, and they just boom, boom, and they're all leaping, and they sort of disappear off in the distance. But I'd never seen that many dolphins. Just obviously somebody was like, hey guys, food that way. Food.
Yeah.
And they just took
Yeah.
off. It was unbelievable.
Well, they do have their way of communicating, and they are incredible creatures.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And I've seen like what I would think would be thousands of them.
It's
migrating.
rare, but man, some of them roll in absolutely massive
And I
packs.
had one experience in the freaking Tuamotus where I was actually like not so sure of what I was doing in terms of where I was.
Yeah.
And the GPS had me somewhere, but like it just didn't feel right. And I was seeing like the bottom where there shouldn't have been any bottom, and it was getting dark. And it just was like, I just felt like, man, you are in the wrong place. And all of a sudden there's these dolphins and they're doing the tail slap thing.
Oh, okay.
There's like 4 or 5 of them. They're on one side of me doing the tail slap thing, and then they charge that way, and they stop. They do the tail slap thing, and they come back, and they do the tail slap thing, and they disappear. And I figured, okay, you are about to die, Philip. And so, like, just trust the universe, trust it all, and follow them.
Yeah.
You know, and they led me into deep water.
Really?
Yes, they did. And led me away from this atoll, which I couldn't see.
Yeah.
Which did show up on the GPS, but I couldn't see it, so I didn't know where it was really.
Right.
And so they led me into deep water. And after that, I just go, you know what? If you don't have faith in life, then you're just a loser. Because like,
faith in nature. Let's call
yeah,
it faith in nature.
Faith in nature. If you don't have faith in nature, then you're just a loser because you're part of it. And like they're trying to, they're there. They're helping you.
Well, let me ask you this. So when you altered your course, did they stop behaving that way?
No, they were like, well, they stopped the tail slap thing, but they were all around me.
Oh, okay.
So I knew when I changed, when I did the tack, and like they kind of fell in on both sides of me and were like, you know, just dolphining with me, that I was doing the right thing.
Well, and obviously you have heard or read about Morticia and his experience near the North and South Trap below Stewart Island, New Zealand, where the dolphins, essentially he was headed right towards him. He didn't realize that Joshua had changed its course. It's really light winds or whatever, but it was, I think, in the evening, and suddenly the dolphins came up, but they would come up to the bow and take a hard turn, and they'd come back and do the same thing, hard turn, and he'd never seen dolphins do that before. And then he, lo and behold, checked his compass, saw he was off course, and then altered his course. Yeah, and then the dolphins went back to the normal stuff. But he was right there on the one little chunk of rock and coral that you can hit down there.
Well, and so I can testify to that the real.
So
they're
tail
there,
slapping.
Huh?
Tail slapping.
Tail slapping.
Was your sign.
And okay, and there's this woman. Her name is Susan Casey. She wrote a book, Voices in the Deep, about dolphins.
Oh, okay.
And then she wrote another book about was the tiger's tooth. It was about great white sharks in the islands off of San Francisco. Spaced the name out just now because I'm old, crazy.
Catalina or something?
No. Right off of San Francisco, there's a group of islands out there that is a shark breeding ground. And then she wrote another book called The Wave, which is about waves in general, and about surfing and about rogue waves and about the ocean and everything. Anyway, I had read her book about dolphins, so like I emailed her from Tonga when I got there and said, well, listen, I had this experience with these dolphins were tail slapping. She goes, well, and I said, so like, what does that mean? And she said, well, what it means is they're trying to get your attention. That's what it means. Right. It's like, that's how they do it with each other. Is they start slapping the tails on the water. It sounds like it vibrates in the water to each other. That is their attention getting device.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I said, well, yeah, okay. They were trying to get my attention, and like I listened to them, and they got me out of trouble. She said, well, that's really great, but it's like it's not the first story.
You ain't special, buddy.
Yeah, nothing special here.
I think that's something very special.
Well, it's just like being a part. Is being a part of it, being a part of the ocean, and wanting to be. My whole thing has always been just wanting to be connected to the ocean, to the wind, to nature, to the universe, to the flow, to all of it, to be in sync with everything concerning the natural world. As a sailor, that's all I ever wanted to do was like be in sync, and so like you have to learn that you listen to the voices that are talking to you.
Yeah,
wherever they are,
and realizing that it's all interconnected, interweaved, and I I truly believe that sailing is one of those ways, especially solo sailing, where you can dive into that much easier than anything else, even when you're out in the woods or anything like that. And I've done a lot of hiking, done the Appalachian Trail and all that sort of stuff. There's nothing that compares with being out in the middle of an ocean and your connectedness, not only to physical nature, as in the ocean and the animals that are in it, but also this invisible part, like the wind and the barometric pressures and all these things.
Yeah, and learning all that stuff. Learning to read it and to trust it and to use it.
And to witness it, even.
And, to witness it. Like we were talking before about both our experiences getting rolled and getting almost dead in the Gulf Stream at the wrong time of year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole few days being in like 35, 40-foot seas and just watching it, I was like, oh, man, like, if I die, like, I know that, like, I saw this.
Yeah.
Like the ocean in its worst mood. Although I did go through a hurricane years and years ago on my circumnav, and that was like, that was ugly as well. But it seemed like the Gulf Stream business was worse.
Well, I think the waves in the Gulf Stream, when, you're dealing with wind against tide, they take a different sort of form,
man.
They're a whole different
wind against
ball
tide.
game.
And that's like the biggest example of that is the Gulf Stream heading more or less to the northeast, and the northeast storm that I experienced coming together. I mean, like, they bucked heads, man, like big time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It sounds like
big
it.
time.
Well, in my case, I had wandered out of the Gulf Stream and into a pretty powerful eddy. And the eddy was headed, the part that I was in, I was essentially going in between two of them, but those eddies were headed north, and the wind was out of essentially like the northwest. And eventually, once I got far enough into that area, that's when the waves really piped up. But the rogue, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, that hit me the night before, that was just a complete oddball, probably twice the size of anything else. It wasn't until the next day, 6 hours later, that I started to see the sets roll in of these giant faces, steep, huge breaking crests that just sort of fell over the front and then continued for 30 seconds, and you're just listening to that noise.
I know. Well, that's what woke me up at 1:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
About 30 seconds before I got tossed.
Yeah.
Because I heard it. I heard the wave just broke, and all that cascading water coming down the face, and just wondering, like, so what now?
Yeah, right. At least you had a little bit of warning.
Well, I had like 30 seconds, and then all of a sudden the boat, I just felt it. I felt like some giant just grabbed a hold of me and just like tossed me, like you would toss a cockroach. That's what I felt like.
Aren't you glad that you have such a tough old boat?
Well, it definitely proved its mettle, no pun intended there, on that one.
Yeah.
And there had been, that was like the worst as far as like, getting picked up and thrown and like, like really rumbling the boat up, and it held. What really surprised me is I didn't lose my mast. That was like the most amazing thing.
Yeah. Because did you have any sail up?
Yeah, I had reef staysail, so I was hove to.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so I was hove to, totally hove to on a reef staysail. I had a reef in there just for hoving to in the worst conditions, and that's what it was. And so, like, after the boat righted, I went over and came back up, and all this stuff was on top of me, and I threw it off. And the thing I was thinking about was, like, the mast.
Yeah.
And so I opened up the hatch, and the mizzen, was right there in my face, of course. And I saw the boom from the main was still there. So I figured, well, they're connected.
Yeah, right. Thank goodness.
So it's still there, and then the dinghy is where it is right now, right outside the hatch.
That's pretty amazing that stayed.
Well, because I tie that sucker down, man.
Like a spider web.
Yeah.
Like that,
I mean, like, I have, It's tied 4 places, but they're all through a block and going through the handrail. It's like a yard on it, so it's down.
Yeah.
It's down. It didn't even move. I was like totally surprised. I lost the oars, lost everything that was in it.
Yeah. I'll bet.
And it became a deck locker because I put fenders in it and shit, and everything that was in it was gone.
Well, and do you have a life raft on board there?
No.
No, you don't. Wow. So that is your life raft in a way.
Well,
kinda.
not really, because like
Not much of one.
because there's nothing.
Yeah, right.
Because it's really little tender,
yeah.
and it wouldn't last in the ocean like 2 freaking seconds. My one experience, the dinghy's been great because I've used it all these years. In Patagonia, you're tying lines ashore every night.
Yeah.
So I was ashore tying a line, and I was standing up in the dinghy to reach a limb, putting the line over the limb, and the dinghy was on top of a rock that I didn't really realize was there.
Yeah.
And so it went down on one side and filled up with water. It didn't fill up with water in totally, but it filled up with water enough. And so I said, okay, it's still floating. I'll just get this line on the limb, and I'll row back to the boat, and I'll take care of business. Well, about 30 yards from the boat, the fucking dinghy just went out of control and flipped over, filled up with water.
Yeah.
And
will it sink, or is it a floater?
No, it was a floater. It floated upside down, and this was in the middle of the winter in Patagonia. And I'm in the water.
Winter.
Yeah, southern winter.
Yeesh.
And I'm in the water by myself. There ain't nobody for hundreds of miles.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking at the dinghy's rolled over, and the oars are all over the place, and I have a couple of lines on shore. And I figured, oh, dude, you got to get out of the water.
Yeah. Hey, buddy, hypothermia.
Yeah, you got to get out of the water now. And so I'm wearing wool pants, wool underwear, wool sweaters, wool shirts, wool hat, gloves, scarves, rain boots, rain pants, raincoat. I weigh like a freaking ton. And I have water pouring into me through all openings. So I'm just walrusing around. And of course, I didn't have a swim ladder out because I wasn't expecting to go swimming.
Right, obviously.
And there was no way in the world that I could ever pull myself onto the boat.
Not with all that on, no.
Especially with all that. So I got to the bobstay.
Climbed up that.
And just wallowed. Climb would be a good word. I just wallowed. Wallowed my way up on deck.
Oh, my God.
And then I saw the dinghy, starting to float away in the oars. And so I had all the lines on shore, so I let some lines looser on the boat and started the engine. I got the dinghy tied upside down, and fetched the oars, and I figured, okay, you got the boat's tied, you got the dinghy, you got to take care of yourself, and you're going to go into hypothermia. So I just stripped all the clothes off, went down below, got into the bunk under some blankets and whipped up some hot water and drank a couple cups of hot water, and I didn't go into hypothermia.
Nice.
At all.
Because you got a little heater on there too, right?
Yeah, I didn't have it going at the time, but as soon as I had the second I did,
Yeah.
it was like getting under the covers.
Right.
That really helped. Getting out of all the wet clothes, just getting totally naked, getting under the covers, and then I could reach over and kind of stretch over to the stove and get the stove lit and put some hot water on because I knew I needed it inside.
Yeah,
in the core.
Get the core.
Get the core.
Warm back up.
And so, so it turned out okay. And then I got the stove going. At that time, it was a wood stove. Now it's diesel. So got the stove going, and I laughed about it later.
As you do.
Yeah, okay.
It's a great
Okay,
memory.
you dumb. It's been dead. It was like, all right. It was like, ay.
Well,
okay.
it's always a bit of a danger when you're trying to get back aboard a boat. Then you don't have any sort of ladder or anything like that.
Do you wear a harness?
No.
Neither do I. I never had a harness on in my life.
I used to have to and I know I'm going to get a little bit of flack on this from some of my listeners, but I used to have to every once in a while on yacht deliveries when I wasn't the captain. And the 2 times in my life where I've almost fallen overboard, tripping over a tether, that, it was perfectly flat calm. It was just at night, and, you're just sitting there having to reclip and unclip, and there's the jack lines and all that sort of stuff. Well, aboard Sparrow, I've never, even going around the world, I never clipped in. I have the equipment, because you never know.
Yeah.
But I will say that the night before the knockdown, I was on deck quite a bit during the day, and as it started to get dark and the waves were getting a little more intense, that was the first time I ever put the harness on, so that I could just, when I was sitting in the cockpit, I just felt a little safer. But I didn't spend much time up there after that. I was like, even with the harness on, big enough wave comes and breaks over this cockpit, I'm gone.
Yeah.
So the smart move isn't to just trust that, it's to actually go down below.
Yeah. I always felt much safer down below. So my sister, who's not a boater, but she does love me, she figured that I should have all the stuff, because I told her that I don't have a harness, I don't wear a harness.
Right.
She read a couple of yachting magazines and books and stuff. She said, well, you got to have a harness. I don't have to have a harness, because I tripped over one that I had. I put the line on, and then I tripped immediately, and I was like heading overboard with the harness on, go upside down. I was like, okay. But anyway, so my sister Allie, so she went out and bought jack lines and bought a harness with a clip-on thing. There were two of them, so you can put like one on, one off.
Right.
She did the research, and she spent $1 zillion, and she sent me this stuff. And she said, well, so Philip, are you using the jack line? It was a new term for her.
Yeah.
She sounded like
Salty old
a salty.
sailor.
Using the jack lines, I go, no.
No, but it's good to have them. I figure it this way, is that having that equipment on board, because you never know. You know how the ocean has a million different moves, and there just might be a situation where it would be nice to at least be able to clip in. Like, one of the things that I think when you don't clip in that happens is you think longer and harder and smarter about what you're about to do on a boat.
Absolutely. I know every second where my feet are and where my hand is. The old saying, one hand for the ship, one hand for yourself. I mean, like, that's how I live.
Absolutely.
And I don't move unless I have it thought out.
You pay the ultimate price if you lose that focus.
Yeah, okay. So for you, me, and the listeners, what's the worst case scenario ever for a sailor is to wind up overboard and watch your perfectly trimmed self-sailing boat go off over the horizon to the sunset by itself. Yep. And you're sitting there going, well, no, that was a dumb move, wasn't it?
True.
Yeah. Okay.
That's very true. I think the only thing that would make that worse is if you had a life jacket on, because then you would be sitting there for a long time until the sharks found you.
Hey, well, you're the very first person, man, that has ever expressed that outside of my own thoughts. That is like, that's what I think about life jackets, is I'd rather just drown. If I'm going overboard and the boat's gone and all that, and I can't get to it, obviously, and all the rest, I want to drown now.
Make my peace.
I would dive,
Yeah, well, I don't know if I'd do that, because you'd run out of steam after
you just
minute
dive.
or two?
No, yeah, but it'd be easier, I think, to just dive.
Yeah,
and just push
going.
it to the limit until you start choking and drown, and then be done with that, because you're going to drown anyway. I don't want to sit there and be in misery as long as it takes. I just do it.
I don't want to get picked apart by animals.
Yeah, I mean, before you die, get some big old gnarly shark start biting on you.
Yeah, right.
Or some other goddamn thing. Anything.
Well, I think it's one of those things, and it's always going to be a bit controversial, but I don't know if you're familiar with Alex Honnold. He's a free solo climber. He has all these world records. He climbs, El Cap and stuff like that without any lines. So he's just doing it, one false move, he's going to fall, he's going to die. And I remember seeing him in an interview, and the guy was asking, well, wouldn't it just be a lot safer to, use lines? Why do you do this solo? And he just looks at him. He's like, that's a stupid question. And I think when people ask me that, that's what I want to say. I don't say it like that. I try and explain it. But I've seen people do inherently stupid things, go up forward completely unnecessarily, because they're clipped in, they feel safe, and they put themselves in this position because you could still get thrown overboard and then smashed up along the hull all day long. And the only reason you went up there is for some stupid reason that I wouldn't go up there because, it's unsafe, but you get this little bit of extra false security, I think, when you clip in and you think, oh, okay, I'm safe now. And you put that trust in it. I think that trust is what keeps me from wanting to always use a harness, because that false sense of security can get you in trouble.
Big trouble.
Big trouble. And if every time I walk forward, even if it's calm or it's, perfect sailing, I know if I fall over, that's it. That's game over.
Game over.
Keeps that focus at 100%.
Yes, sir.
And it doesn't lessen. I mean, the minute I might start feeling like, wow, I don't have 100% anymore, then yeah, maybe I'll start wearing a harness.
Okay, so
But we'll see. Who knows?
Being at my age, I am not as agile or as springy as I used to be.
Right.
Like I can't jump like I used to. I could jump anywhere, and I was really agile, and I would jump off the cabin top and grab onto the head stay. Now I crawl. But okay.
Now I crawl.
Yeah, man. I'll crawl out there. If I have to go up to the head of the bowsprit or into the eyes of the ship, for one reason or the other, or out on the bowsprit. I mean, I've gone out on the bowsprit with no harness, no nothing, in gales to get a jib down that was all tangled up and stuff.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, well,
how did you get? I mean,
okay, so right before I met you in Maine, I was coming up from the Caribbean. I'll backtrack a little bit. I was coming up from the Caribbean. I had a roller furled jib at that point. Before that, coming across from Africa to the Caribbean, I was still hanked on. I still had hanked on for several years.
yeah.
And crossing from St. Helena to Brazil, it was the wind came up from 10 knots to 30 knots in a couple of minutes.
Really?
And it started coming up, and I go, okay, man, this isn't going to last, because it had been calm for weeks, and I go, just hang on to it.
No, not a squall or anything.
Yeah, no squall. Just all of a
wind.
sudden, there, it just started coming. It was crystal clear. There wasn't no black clouds around. It just started coming, and I figured, okay, it's not going to last. Just hold on to it. You'll be all right. So I was sailing, had hands on the tiller, took the wind vane off and everything, had the boat. And then I realized that, man, this ain't going away. And you got to get that jib down.
The waves are
now.
starting to build a little
Yeah, you
bit.
got to get that jib down now, because you're
Yeah.
going to sail this thing under
Right.
if you don't do it. And so I go out there. I was on the bowsprit and hanked on jib, and the downhaul got clogged up. So I was out on the very end of the bowsprit trying to pull the sail down, and the bowsprit went under, plunged under, and when it came up, I was off of it.
Oh, geez.
I was totally off of it.
Yeah,
And there was a second where I saw in my mind that you're not connected to the boat no more, man. You are in space.
Yeah.
And I came down across the bowsprit, knocked the wind out of myself.
Oh, as it came back
As it
up.
came back up, I came down, and the two inertias coming together,
Yeah.
and knocked the wind out of myself and dented my rib or something. I don't know.
Ugh.
And I got the sail down, and I crawled back into the cockpit, and I said, "Well, okay, brother, if you live through this, you get to Grenada. I am getting a roller furler."
Wow. Really?
So in Grenada, I did a refit there in Grenada Grenada Boat Works, Grenada Boat Yard.
And is that what you have right now? Roller furler?
Yeah, same one.
I'm still Hank on.
Yeah, well, after that experience for me, you have a pulpit though, don't you?
I do, but it's one of those things where I err on the side of caution. I mean, I've been caught out a few times for sure, but typically if the weather looks unpredictable, I'm not really using any jibs. It's all staysail, and
Well, I use my
reef stuff.
staysail more than anything. My staysail and my mizzen more than anything now.
Yeah,
But
I'll bet.
then I was using a jib. So, so I got a roller furler. Okay, so I think the story is when I was coming up to the East Coast the first time when I met you in Maine, I was planning on going into New Jersey because I had relatives there. A fairly good blow, a 35, 40 knot blow came up. And
That's windy.
and off New Jersey, the roller furler, the shackle that was on the roller furler,
Mm-hmm.
broke.
Oh,
And so
okay.
the
So it
roller-
unfurled.
Huh?
So it
No,
unfurled.
it was like, no, it was. I already had it furled, but it was swinging around. It was moving around enough,
Oh, okay.
but
Yeah.
it wasn't really tight
Mm-hmm.
because it's not on a stay. It's on an internal stay.
Okay.
So you just have a double block up there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it was working. So the shackle broke.
Gotcha.
So in the middle of the night, I heard this racket.
It's
And so I
scraping on
stuck
your
my,
deck or
well, it was
whatever.
more than that. It was like banging in and everything. So I stick my head out of the hatch, like really cautious, and I see that the roller furler is swinging back and forth. I go, well, okay, man. how
That's
you
and
gonna-
that's a lot of weight and
It's
a
a-
big
and it-
object. If
well,
it hits
it's
you,
a 30-pound bronze
Yeah.
spool
swinging on like
swinging
a 30,
around. Yeah, swinging in the middle of the night. So I just got down prone position and crawled out to the mast, to the foremast,
Mm-hmm.
and got a hold of the halyard and dropped the damn thing in the water.
Smart.
And then in the next morning, I brought it back up. The sail was shredded.
Why didn't you bring it up that night?
Because I was too scared to, man, because it was swinging around. And I knew it was going to kill me. And the best thing to do was just to get it in the water, get it away from like swinging around.
Yeah.
And it was a really wild night and all that. So I got up in the morning. I was concerned about it. I could hear it like kind of banging against the boat, but it wasn't the furler. It was the sail. So I got up in the morning and pulled the thing up, and the sail was shredded.
Yeah, I'll bet.
So I didn't have a jib anymore. And so it was still windy. So I got out the charts and stuff and figured out, like, okay, New Jersey is not an option right now. But the best place that you can get to would be Montauk. So I sailed into Montauk,
Okay.
Long Island. You been there?
No.
The end of the eastern end of Long Island.
But yeah, I know the area. Yeah.
So you can get in there and you get into the harbor fairly easy. It's like not a real big deal.
Right.
It's open. It's there's no real dangers. There's no shoals or anything. The entrance to the harbor is a bit narrow, but it's like I was already on the motor by that time. Anyway, so I did some research while I was sitting in Montauk, and it was this guy, a sailmaker in Greenport, Long Island, that said he would make the sail. So I went to Greenport, and he made me a new sail, and I was there for most of the summer, and I was on my way to Europe then, and that's when I had the incident in the Gulf Stream off of Maine where it went totally dead flat calm, and it was like really super tropical.
And it spooked you.
And it spooked me because
Yeah.
it was like the middle of August. I go, you're going to get lured into keep on going, then you're going to get your ass whooped bad. So, like, never mind.
North Atlantic could be a pretty scary
Hell
place.
yeah, it can. It
Yeah.
can be one of the worst oceans anywhere.
I firmly believe that. I mean,
Yeah, oh, sure.
between that and I would say that that chunk between Cape Hatteras and Greenland is right up there comparable with the Cape of Good Hope and the Agulhas Current and the Southern Ocean roaring against that.
Well, all of that because you have the Grand Banks that are sticking out there,
Mhm.
and George's Banks and all that are super shallow.
George's is probably one of the scariest places. I
Yeah,
think.
and
Those currents are
and
nuts.
nuts. And Sable Island, which is really a low island, which is in the middle of the corner of a gyra where all this current and everything is
Yeah,
swirling
the
around
Labrador's
it.
coming down. You get
And the
eddies
Gulf
from the
Stream's going
stream.
up, and
Yeah.
and it's foggy there, really, really foggy because of that, because of the cold water and the warm water coming together. It's just a bad place.
Oh yeah.
and you can get in some serious trouble there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because those systems rip off that coast at crazy speeds sometimes.
Yeah.
And they just seemingly explode. I mean, when they call them a bombogenesis or whatever it is, the thing. I mean, I watched the first little low pressure system I went through in the Gulf of Maine when I left, because I knew it was coming, but I knew it was just going to be 12 hours of hove to, waiting for the wind to switch, and then I was going to ride it out. The barometric pressure dropped 30 bars in 24 hours.
Yeah, that's
and I
not
was
good.
like, holy God. But it was just because it was a small, really tightly packed one. Never got over near gale to gale force, which is enough though. It's I was
enough
like,
in a
holy cow.
32-foot boat. Yeah, hell yeah.
Maybe I should go back, but it was one of those things where I kept going. Had I known what was going to happen, maybe I would have done things differently. But.
When I left Maine, I waited in this place just south of Rockland, a little tiny fishing village there, and I waited for a week or so, and then all of a sudden there was a window, and I figured, okay, man, this is it. You either go now or you don't go.
Mm-hmm.
You either move or you don't. And so I went out. I was out about 150 miles, 200 miles away, and there's a Coast Guard plane flew over me, then did a circle, and came back, and they blinked their lights. So, that means get on the radio.
Oh, okay.
That's what they do.
Yeah.
If you don't have your radio on, I didn't have my radio on.
I never have my radio
Yeah.
on. Well, I do when I'm in a high traffic area.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah, that's it. If I'm coming into crossing a shipping lane or something, or here, I'll keep the radio on sometimes. But anyway, so he blinked the lights at me, so I came up on the radio, and he asked me, if I was like this particular boat, and I go, no, that's not me. He goes, well, we're looking for this boat. Have you seen this other sailboat? And I go, no, I haven't seen anything. And he said, well, okay, we're looking for him. We got, an emergency. It wasn't a Mayday, but it was an emergency call, blah, blah, blah. And so I said, no, I haven't seen him. And he goes, well, okay, we're going to continue on your way, but I would like to tell you that there is a system.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That
A weather update.
Yeah, a weather update that is going to be coming across your beam here in the next 14, 15 hours.
Oh, wow.
And so I said, well, thank you very much. Good day. And then looked at the chart and go, okay, so you ain't going back. There's no going back.
Right.
There's just no going back. So, just hold on to your britches, buddy, because here it comes.
Yeah. Oh,
and that was it. That was the one.
Yeah. And, I think in a lot of ways, though, it's always going to be a bit of a gamble what you're going to run into out there.
It's always a gamble.
And you can do as best as you can do to prepare the boat and be prepared as far as experience goes. But in the end, if that ocean wants to take you down, that ocean can take you down.
It's going to eat you. The ocean will eat anything. Biggest oil tanker, biggest aircraft carrier, biggest container ship, the Evergreen something that got stuck in the Suez. I love that, man. That was the greatest news I ever saw. You go, oh, man. That is just pure human arrogance.
Yeah.
To build it,
and the Valdez too.
Yeah.
When that thing went aground. I watched a little video.
I was
about
up there
that.
then.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Jeez. All that guy had to do was turn harder.
He was drunker than a lord, and he was down
the
his
captain
captain.
was.
The captain was. He was drunk as a lord, and he was letting his junior officers drive it out.
And he was, he's headed, he sees the light that's on that big reef or whatever, and he starts his turn, but for whatever reason, he wasn't turning hard enough, and just, bam, pummels into that. Oh, my goodness. Such a big mistake.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, big mistake.
Those things do happen out there,
Yeah.
Nobody's got it perfect, that's for sure.
No.
That one probably could have been avoided.
Yeah, and the thing about Suez is just pure human arrogance, because they have a ship that is longer than the narrowest channel, the narrowest turn, the narrowest elbow. And it is windy there and whatnot. And they got that thing stuck in there across Suez, and it cost them billions of dollars in shipping woes because the ships on both sides had to turn around
Oh, yeah.
and go back out
It
around
literally halted global commerce for I don't know how long.
For
we're
a
we're still
long
trying
time.
to recover from it. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
and then along with the COVID thing of having ports shut down, like there was like 100 ships off of Long Beach, California that couldn't
I
get
remember seeing
in.
images of that.
Yeah, and actually on this trip, coming down I left from went out into the ocean from Cape Lookout, North Carolina, and was coming down to Fernandina. So I was like 3 days offshore, and I was 45 miles out in the late evening, just 45 miles out, passing Charleston, in between Charleston and Savannah, and all of a sudden I see these lights up in front of me, and big lights, and I couldn't tell in the binoculars what they were, and I turned on the GPS and my AIS, and fuck, man, there are like 45 ships out there.
Yeah.
Do you know about that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because I mean, ever since probably 2020, and maybe even a little bit before that. But even on this last trip, when I sailed right through all the anchored ships outside of Savannah, and there were 27.
Yeah.
And I'm like worming my way through.
I know. I did that in the middle of the night
Holy cow.
in squalls.
Oh, jeez. Super fun. Yeah. Well, I mean, between Jacksonville, Savannah, and Charleston, that's some major shipping that's going on.
Oh, man. So, like, it was getting dark, and I was sailing really well, and I figured, hey, I'm in for a nap. I'm up for a nap. I'm up for a night's sleep.
Not
It's all going
anymore.
to be good. And then turn on the GPS and see all these ships there, AIS, and go, oh, Jesus Christ, man.
You kiss that goodbye.
Now what? And then when I got close, it was like they were everywhere. I was like going underneath one stern, going underneath another bow.
And they stink, don't all that exhaust.
Yeah, and then there was one. There's a squall, and it was a pretty good squall, but it wasn't. I could tell that it wasn't going to kill me.
Yeah.
It was just a matter of holding on.
Right.
So I'm holding on to the boat, and I look up. There's a black wall right next to me, cruising by. I see the green starboard light.
Yeah.
And it's like 200 yards away from me, and I'm holding on to dear life. God. And then he goes by. I have to like duck underneath some stern and head this way. And I go, okay, this is going to be one interesting night.
Yeah.
And there ain't no sleep in this one
Ew.
at all.
And sometimes that's just how it has to be.
Just how it goes.
Anytime I'm nearing land, anytime I'm near lots of traffic, I know sleep is not an option. There's no alarm clock in the world that I'm going to use.
Do you use alarms?
Away.
Like
No.
radar alarm or GPS alarm or anything like that?
I use the AIS alarm.
Oh. So do you broadcast?
Yes. So I have an independent transceiver and a receiver on that. And then now I have a backup where essentially the VHF is a receiver. So at least I can, receive it. Like, because when I lost the Gallows, I lost my AAS. And so I was from Bermuda all the way back. I was old school. I had a radar reflector and my binoculars. And that was pretty scary because I had never been in that situation offshore where I had the total confidence of being able to go to sleep for a couple hours. I didn't have that anymore. Plus, I was pretty rattled from the experience.
Right.
And I had 2 more weather systems. I went through 5 systems when I was out there. And the second or the 4th and 5th were pretty scary because, again, I was still pretty rattled. But the fact that I wasn't sleeping much at all made it worse.
Right, absolutely.
And there were 2 bouts where I probably made it just about to like 40 something hours without any sleep. And you start to like see things 40.
Oh yeah.
Which even going around the world, the longest I went was maybe 36 hours, and that was getting in close to the Falklands.
Yeah.
When people say, "Oh, I stayed up for 3 days," I'm like, I don't even think my body would allow me to do that. It would just shut itself down and be like,
yeah.
you're just
in
gonna
my
pass out.
experience, it does. Like, I think the longest that I think it was like 28 hours or something. that's what I reckoned it to be, 28 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And
You start to lose
well, I
your
just knew that, like,
capabilities.
I'm losing it, man. You're losing it. I knew that I was losing it.
And that's
And
where
I said,
things
Philip, you're losing it, man.
they get
You gotta,
unsafe.
like, I just, like, crumbled into the bottom of the cockpit.
Yeah.
Just crumbled.
Well,
Just
Matt,
and like just fell asleep, for an hour or two.
and that's all you need.
And that, yeah. And I was in a situation, it was crazy as hell. I was heading towards shore, and there was a light in front of me, and I knew I was heading towards that light. And I was like 20 miles out or something, but I saw that light, and I was like already over the edge of sleep deprivation,
Mhm.
and the boat was yawing.
Right.
So I was trying to keep up with the light. In my
Oh,
mind, it
yeah.
was the light that was moving
Moving.
and not me.
yeah.
So I was
yeah,
trying
you
to
were
keep up.
definitely
I was
sleep
gone. I was
deprived,
out
right?
of it, man. I was trying to keep up with the light, and I go, so like, what the hell is that light? It's a train. And
It's a
you got to get
train.
behind the train. It was like no train. There was no train anywhere near. But I was
Yeah.
like totally gone. And then all of a sudden, like in 1 second, I just said, Philip, you have lost it, man.
Yeah, dude.
You are totally lost. And like I just crumpled. I just like a piece of tissue in the bottom of the
right.
cockpit.
Well, you do, and that's your body basically saying,
Yeah,
you
you're
need
done,
to
man. You're
stop.
done. Yeah, you're either gonna die or you're gonna like catch a little bit of sleep. I don't know how long I was out.
Yeah, like I said, it usually doesn't take much. I know that on one of those long stints, I fell asleep for maybe an hour, and I got right back up, and it felt great. And then I was up for I don't know how long. But are you familiar with Matt Rutherford? He's the first guy to circumnavigate the North and South America in one shot. He did it on Alvin Vega, I think, 27-foot boat.
Oh yeah, no, I don't know who that is. I know those boats. Though.
He's epic. I mean, he did this in 2011. Northwest Passage, Cape Horn up, never stopped.
Who's that?
Matt Rutherford.
Oh,
Yeah, great guy. But he when he and I talk about that, like sleep deprivation, he's like, I get to a certain point, I'll just drop all the sails and be like, I don't care if something runs me over or what. I'm just going to sleep.
yeah. Well, you don't care at that point.
You don't.
Well, and that's the way us humans are built. It's like you reach a certain point,
Yeah, and you're just like,
your brain kicks out, man. You got to sleep. That's all there is to it. You got to like shut it down.
yeah.
You know,
It's like a
just,
safety mechanism.
well, you drop all the sails and you just lay to, just let her. Somebody told me years and years and years ago, when the shit hits the fan, everything else fails. Just leave the boat alone.
Yeah,
If it's worth anything, it will ride it out, no matter what you do.
That's true. That is true. Well, and you were saying you were hove to in that storm where you eventually got knocked down. Have you ever laid a hull where you don't have any sail up, you lashed the tiller in the middle?
I laid a hull the night that the roller furler came off.
And how does your boat react to that?
It's just like it went sideways to the swell, but it's just like I don't know. It was comfortable.
Yeah.
And
It creates that slick, right?
Yeah, and I was like losing it already.
Mm-hmm.
And I went out there and saw this pendulum swinging around with a 30-pound piece of bronze on it that I knew would crack my skull like an egg.
Yeah.
I was like, man, you just got to get away from this thing. There's nothing more that you can do. I can't get the staysail up because I got to go beyond the pendulum to get the staysail untied and all that.
The danger zone.
Get into the danger zone. So just like let the boat go, man. This is the time
Yeah.
to see how that happens. So I got up in the morning. I slept for like 3 or 4 hours. Got up with the dawn. Boats just sitting there merrily. And actually, after I figured it out, I actually made like 20 miles because I was going in the right direction.
Oh, nice. There
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah, so it
Little
was
bonus.
a bonus. Go, yeah, hey, man, that's cool.
I typically like to run. I run. Even in the worst of the worst, I've always just peeled straight downwind. Not straight downwind, just a little bit off.
Well, that's what Bernard says. He likes to run.
He likes to run, yeah. I mean, I did when I went through Tropical Storm Wanda, that one, because they were forecasting like I think 50 knots, and I knew I could not get away from it. And first was being hit with easterlies, I believe.
Where was that at?
This was halfway across, almost halfway across between the U.S. and Africa. I was just about starting my turn south to go to the equator. And essentially, yeah, it meandered around and then just started coming right towards me. And
Did you have some sort of weather source?
Yeah. At that point, I was using a sat phone and downloading the weather files onto my computer. Now I use sort of a different system with the Iridium Go and all that sort of stuff.
How's that work out for you?
Works really well. Yeah,
and
faster, cleaner, cheaper.
And so, like, that is a subscription, is that right?
You have to buy the minutes, but I don't use Predict Wind, so there's no subscription on that. I use another program, an app called Luck Grib, and you can buy that for like $50, and then it's yours.
What about the hardware? The machine.
The machine, yeah, you have to buy the Iridium Go. I think you can rent them from sat phone companies, but I think
so. You don't have to hook up with
Predict Wind.
Predict Wind, because I got into a pissing contest with them.
I just didn't want to pay for another subscription. That was my thing, because I used the Garmin InReach as well. That's what I use to be able to text people back and forth.
Yeah, right.
And then the Iridium is just for downloading weather.
Right.
So I bought that with like 1,000 minutes on it, and then found I was going to do Predict Wind, but then it just became too far out of my reach.
Okay,
expense-wise.
so I got started with Predict Wind and bought an Iridium Go, and it never worked. I never could get it to be right. And so I called them. I texted them 1,000,000 times and never responded to me.
Yeah.
And then one time they responded to me and they gave me a tech assistant. So I got to the tech assistant and he led me on a garden path that wasn't even close. And the thing just didn't work.
Right.
And so I called them when I got ashore and I said, this is not working. I want out. And they go, well, you can't get out. You got a contract. I said, well, okay. So the only thing I've got going for me is I am one mouth in the world of sailing, and I'm going to badmouth you every single chance I get, constantly, forever. And I'm going to start cussing and calling you guys like the biggest ripoffs on the
1-star
navigational. No stars.
No
Zero
stars.
stars.
Phil just took the star. Well, let's try and stay on a positive note, but I will
So, all right,
that.
so they canceled me.
Oh, they did. Okay.
And that's all I wanted. And
right.
I got out of it. You know?
That's good. That's good. Yeah, because it's obviously we know that boating stuff and offshore stuff is always going to be expensive. But yeah, when you look at the numbers on that stuff, I'm just like,
It was like $135 a month when I started with them.
Yeah.
For a subscription, and it was $1,000 for the gizmo.
Right.
I was lucky. I was kind of like wrong, I guess.
That's good you can admit that, A lot of it is
I was
ignorance.
wrong in that I met somebody on the dock and we were talking about all this stuff, and he said he wanted an Iridium Go.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, listen, I've got one that I'm not using because I'm not going offshore. I kind of lied a little bit and said, well, I'm just not using it now. And I paid $1,000 for it, and I'll be glad to get 800. And he goes, yeah.
And there you go.
Get this damn thing off the boat, man.
Geez. So now you don't have one at all, right?
No, I don't have any connection at all to weather.
Wow.
Which is what I've never
Besides
had.
the old barometer.
Huh?
Besides the old
barometer. That's it, man. The barometer, and I have a couple of books about
clouds and all that stuff.
I have a lot of weather books, but I have one book in particular that was written by an admiral in the American Navy during World War II.
Oh, okay.
That crunched all this stuff, correlations between wind speed, direction, and barometer.
Oh, interesting.
So if the barometer is doing one thing, the wind's doing something else, you can tell what's going to happen next, pretty much.
Interesting. Well, not to harp back on Bernard, but he always said the more he's learned about the weather, the less he knows.
Well, true enough. I mean, because there's
smart man.
Well, I mean, you can only learn so much about it because there's really nothing to learn. I mean, like, it's totally unpredictable. There are patterns sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
There are climates and climatical changes and seasons that do various things, but in the end, there are so many variables that can change the ball game in a half a second for a reason that you have no idea about. I mean, like, as a weather person, you have the basics of temperature,
pressure,
water temperature, air pressure, highs and lows, spinning around different directions. You're in the northern hemisphere, so it's going counterclockwise, and vice versa and all that. So you have an idea, but there ain't no guarantee, and things just happen.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, and even that's one thing I did learn. So before I had the Iridium Go, using a computer and the sat phone, it was real tricky, and it took a long time to download the weather, and it was a pain in the butt. And if it was rough out, I would lose the signal, so I would only do it usually when it was nice, so maybe every like 5 days, right? So that left me a little bit in the dark. When I had the Iridium Go, I could download pretty much every day if I wanted to. And what I found was that gave me a bit of overconfidence. I don't think I would have ever wandered anywhere near the Gulf Stream had I not been fed of this information, these up-to-date weather, up-to-date current.
Thank you for that. Because I've always thought that too much information, like this guy, what's his name? Scott, somebody who's the foremost
weather guy or
weather
something?
guy, the weather router.
I don't know him. I've never used one before.
I've never used him either.
Besides friends that, follow
Okay,
the
so
trip.
there's this one guy, his name is Scott something. I don't know. But my point about that is here's this guy who's in this really cool farmhouse up in Vermont somewhere.
Yeah.
With his dogs running around, chickens, and beautiful hippie chick. And he found this way to like make a lot of money by being a weather router.
Right.
Well, I'm going to put my life in his hands.
Well, he's just giving you information.
He's just giving information that he's crunching.
What you do with it.
Yeah, and he's crunching it his own way. Well, there are people who swear by him or swear by other weather sources.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, from my point of view, is in my boat, sailing vessel Ness, I ain't outrunning nothing.
Nothing. No, we get run over.
I ain't outrunning a goddamn thing. The best I could do maybe is duck.
Right.
But like outrun a storm, outrun a system, try to get it out of its way, no way in the world.
It's nice to know that it's coming so you can get a little more prepared.
I don't know. I would argue that because like in the time I know that it's coming, I would do nothing but worry. I just assume, okay, there it is, man. Hope to get the sails down, tight.
That is
down,
true.
And there you go.
There's been a lot of times where the forecast looks like it's dead on for like a 2 a.m. wind shift or a huge buildup or something, and I will hours before that like put reefs in the main and this and that, and then I'm wallowing for hours.
Yeah,
waiting for this thing that doesn't happen.
Just worrying yourself nuts.
See, and that's where I think I will take as much information aboard as possible. But I learned a valuable lesson on this last trip is that you cannot get overconfident, because what you're seeing on that screen, what that forecast is telling you, is not an absolute fact. And just because you have the most detailed, cool new app, it doesn't make for anything when it comes down to the fact that the ocean, the wind, the waves are unpredictable.
Unpredictable.
Absolutely.
And they're going to do what they do. They change for reasons that you can't see. And then on top of that, add to that right now is for whatever reason, you don't have to go there, but for whatever reason, there are changes happening in the climate.
Yeah. Oh, things are changing.
Whether it's like, just natural evolution of the planet and all the various ice and warming stages that we've gone through, or, it's man-induced, or some of the others, some, bits and pieces, whatever. There are things that are happening now weather-wise that are unprecedented.
Well, and I was just going to ask you, so in all the years that you've been going out to sea, What do you think's changing the most? What are you seeing with those eyes?
Well, I guess I'd have to say just basically the unpredictability of it. Because before, I was a staunch user of the pilot charts.
Yeah.
I
It gave
trust
you
'em.
information, percentages of, you got 10%. 10% of the time, gales are going to be in this spot at this month of the year, right?
Yes.
Those old school ones.
Yeah, old school.
Nice.
And so that's what I used. So I believed that. And I would plan accordingly I'd plot across a pilot chart.
Yeah.
If I was going across an ocean, I'd see like, okay, in April, there's more gales here. There's less gales here. Why go there when there's more gales? So I would do that. And that pretty much kept me out of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work anymore.
Doesn't work anymore, yeah.
That's the thing. Okay, and I had one experience. I don't know if we talked about this. I was heading to Europe like last year or the year before. I don't remember because time just like who knows anymore. And the older you get, that's the way it is.
Heck
I can't
yeah.
remember like there's so many trips and so many crossings and so many stuff. I don't know.
It bleeds all in
But
together.
yeah, it is. It's all one. So I was heading to Europe, and I was northeast of Bermuda already. I bypassed Bermuda because the weather was good. I kept on going.
Mm-hmm.
And I was northeast of Bermuda, and a system formed out there.
Right.
And I was in it, man. I was like right there where the system formed. And like it wasn't, I had, when I passed Bermuda, I was able to get, they put out a really strong VHF signal.
Oh, to blast out
Yeah.
notice to mariners.
Yeah, notice to mariners. So I just caught the edge of that. And it all sounded good. There wasn't anything on the screen about nothing.
Yeah.
So I figured, okay, man, you're good to go. Just keep on going.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, boom, there it is. And it was like a formidable system. The whole sky turned black.
Jeez. Yeah.
And it was coming from the east. And I just figured, man. I
Coming
don't
from
know.
the east?
Yeah, it was coming from the
Oh,
east.
the winds were coming from the
Yeah,
east. So
the
you were on
wind-
the southern edge of it.
Yeah, it was like, it was it was a cyclone. It was going counterclockwise. So I was on the outside edge of it, wind coming from the east. And I figured I had no chance of even hoving to and holding into it because I didn't know how long it was going to last. I didn't know even what it was.
Yeah.
Except it was like ugly. And so I just turned around and came back to the continent, and it all dissipated and everything well before I even got close. It was like it was gone in a couple of days, but I was already heading back to Carolina.
Yeah, right.
So I figured I'm not turning around and going back to Europe and be stupid about this and look
What
for
time of year was this?
It was like in May. It was
May.
like it was early.
May? Yeah.
It was in May, and it was a total anomaly storm, unprecedented.
Mm-hmm.
A tropical storm forming that early in the season north of Bermuda.
Mm.
So I figured, okay,
Yeah, the water's pretty.
I don't know anything anymore.
Right.
Either
right.
it's
All
like what
bets
you
are
just
off.
said a little bit ago. It's all a gamble. You either do it or you don't.
Yeah.
You either take the risk or you don't. You risk it or you just shut your mouth. One or the other.
You ain't gonna see much if you don't risk it.
Well, you got you got to play the game or sit on the couch and read more Bernard Maducier and
live vicariously.
live
through it.
vicariously through Donald Crowhurst.
Oh, jeez. Well, as we're at almost 2 hours now.
Wow,
believe it or
2
not. I
hours.
know,
Yak,
right?
yak, yak.
I feel like you and I could probably sit for 6 hours.
Yeah, probably. I mean, we both got more stories. but
we
like,
definitely do.
all right, so this is your interview, of course, and I've been trying to, pay attention to it. So, okay, so is there any other one question that you would have for me?
Yes.
Yeah, what's that?
Okay, so it's I guess not so much just a poignant question, but it's more a subject that I'd like your take on or your thoughts on. Now, when I head out to sea, as opposed to life on land, and this could just be me, I don't really know, but when I'm out there is such a huge emphasis or realization or feeling that I have a lot of purpose in my time and my life when I'm at sea. So it's not only the purpose of I'm doing something that I enjoy, but it's also the purpose of I need to keep this boat sailing. So I have purpose there. And then I'm trying to go from said point A to destination. So there's a purpose that each day I'm making way to get closer and closer. And I found that when I'm living in those circumstances out at sea, there's a sense of fulfillment and a reason why I'm doing everything, and a sense, I guess, to the world around me and why in the hell I'm even doing it. And it kind of sounds weird because it's not like I'm doing it for a job. It's not like I'm doing it for any said reason going out to sea. But for whatever reason, this frivolous occupation or frivolous sort of life that I lead when I go out there fills me with this purpose, and it feels really good. And I'm wondering if you have any takes on what it's like, and if you feel a sense of purpose different from the rest of your life when you're out at sea. I know it's a pretty thick question.
Yeah, it's a pretty thick question, but it's really not a hard question to answer, because I just feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, that there's just nothing else for me to do, that my life is what I wanted it to be. I've manifested it, like everybody manifests everything in their life. You know, your life is a reflection of what you make it. And so I'm just doing what I think I should be doing. And my whole purpose anyway is to be the best Philip that I can be, the realest Philip that I can be, doing the best I can do in the real world that I live in, being a part of the real world, not being connected to the computer or societies or groups or anything else, just being Philip the best I can be. And taking it to the very end. That's all I know.
Nice. Well, I think that's going to be the best way that we can end this podcast. I want to thank you for spending so much time. I know you're still planning on taking off tomorrow, right?
I'm planning on taking off. Yeah, I want to take off. It looks like the weather's going to be good, but like I won't say that I am definitely taking off because there is no definitely anymore. And I've learned majorly 1,000,000 times over that I can say to you, this is my plan, and it ain't going to happen that way. You know, I've never planned to do what I'm doing right now.
Right.
Being here in North or in South Carolina, when I left the boatyard in early February in St. Mary's, I was planning on going to the Caribbean or to the Bahamas, spend the rest of the winter in the northern end of the Bahamas, maybe Eleuthera, and then in May, first weather opportunity, sail to the south coast of Newfoundland, spend most of the summer there, and then go across the Atlantic to Scotland, and then come back through the Canaries next year. That was the plan. And then on one phone call, my niece and nephew made plans to come to Oriental. They have other friends in the area and family that they want to visit, and they decided that they're coming to visit me on a certain date. And I don't do dates. I don't do schedules. But I love them.
Besides the tide.
I love them. Besides the tide. I love them. And so I said, okay, I'll do the best I can. So like all of a sudden I changed my whole plan to go back to Oriental when I wasn't really planning on it.
The life of a sailor right there, man.
And so I'm going to Oriental right now. I have a month to get there as of right now, today, a month. And I still have 300 something miles to go. So I want to like kind of get there. But if I woke up in the morning and it was rainy, windy, and horrible and cold like it was this morning,
yeah, right.
I just say,
Just stay, right?
Hey, whatever. I like it here, and like this is nice. The marina is great, and talking to you, and
Oh, I as soon as I knew that was you on the end of the dock, that made my day. It really did, because it's very rare, you meet like-minded adventurers that actually.
Well, like we talked about early on in this conversation, that it is amazing and fairly common to run into people that you know.
Yeah.
I have some friends I talked to yesterday that I had. They're from Oriental. I've met them 4 years ago. Anyway, we've become good friends, and they were coming back from the Bahamas just now. We hooked up for a couple nights in Georgia. And Kip, he said, well, Philip, we met people that know you almost everywhere. And for a person who claims to be a recluse and claims to be a self-sufficient, by-yourself person, you sure know a lot of people,
Got a reputation.
Boat does.
Well, yeah, no, and that's one of those things. I always try and remember to stay pretty humble. When people come and want to see the boat and everything, the boat gets all the credit. Because the boat does the work.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of.
You're the weak link in the chain.
Oh,
always.
totally.
We know that. I know that. I don't have any doubt about that. And the older